Professor and class, this is Giovanni. For today's presentation, I will identify the concepts discussed in our textbook, the author referenced in the text, and the original article by the author that informed the textbook's discussion. I will also present an additional scholarly article that cites the original author's research, followed by my insights. Our textbook introduces mediations as a valuable tool for alternative dispute resolution. It defines mediation as a process in which a neutral, impartial third party with no interest in the outcome facilitates a non-adversarial discussion among disputing parties in order to reach an agreement. A critical aspect of mediation is that the mediator lacks the authority to impose a decision, requiring the parties themselves to determine the outcome. The textbook goes on to identify 6 core values or principles of mediation: impartiality, empathy, effectiveness as a questionnaire, value reputation, confidentiality, and process skills. It is at this point that the text introduces Landsberger 1956 research, which identified key characteristics of mediation in labor disputes. These characteristics include an appropriate sense of humor, the ability to act unobstructedly during conflict, the ability to create a perception of alignment with disputing parties, concerns for the well-being, persistence, and patience, and specific knowledge of the subject area in which they are mediating. Henry A. Landsberger research article, Final Report on Research Project in Mediation, originally sought to determine whether psychological tests could measure the traits associated with competent and desirable mediators. His hope was to assist in procuring new mediators by vexing them beforehand. To accomplish this goal, he first had to determine which attributes constituted proficiency as a mediator. Not necessarily who had those traits, but what those traits were. Through interviews, he identified 10 key mediator traits: originality of ideas, an appropriate sense of humor, the ability to act unobstructedly, the capacity to be one of us in an informal, nonpartisan manner, the ability to command respect as an authority, a willingness to apply pressure when necessary, emotional self-control, persistence and patience in the mediation process, the ability to quickly grasp complex disputes, and accumulated knowledge of labor relations. Landsberger attributes these traits to the mediator's personal skills, including their ability to communicate and manage complex relationships under heated conditions of conflict. When a mediator lacks a trait, he or she can compensate for that shortcoming with another trait, which he dubbed the halo effect. Despite his research, Landsberger was unable to reach a final scientific conclusion and instead encouraged his study as a guide for others to build upon. Author Christopher Honeyman, in his article 5 Elements of Mediation, was able to add to Landsberger's research, specifically the halo effect. As a mediator himself, Honeyman wanted to develop a clear and consistent set of standards for selecting, training, and evaluating potential mediators, as well as to establish a standard for training. His study was conducted on behalf of the Wisconsin Employment Relationships Commission, a labor relations agency that at that time employed 20 staff members, managed about 1,000 mediations per year, and had 50 years of existence. Honeyman reviewed 16 cases from the top 5 mediators. Those selected demonstrated consistent results as defined by conventional labor mediation, had a settlement rate relative to other mediators, were respected by their colleagues, and were acceptable to the parties involved during the mediation process. His observation was that each mediator had their own innate style. However, all demonstrated 5 recurring elements of activity. Those activities are investigation, empathy, persuasion, invention, and distraction. During the investigation stage, all mediators engaged in intensive fact finding. All mediators demonstrated empathy and gradually increased persuasive efforts as the mediation progressed. For the invention portion, each tried to develop different solutions to the problems, and all the mediators also tried to distract the parties regularly to diffuse tension sessions. Now, each mediator had their strength in one action and weaknesses in another. However, they were able to compensate for weaker elements with strengths in others. Like Landsberger's observation of the halo effect, in the results page of his article, Honeyman cites Lamberger's 1956 study of the halo effect and confirmed its effect. Both studies suggest that many of the most significant components of effective mediation are personal characteristics. However, these characteristics can be observed, documented, and taught. Both Landsberger and Honeyman place strong emphasis on empathy, particularly the ability to understand and relate to others' perspectives. This emphasis is like the social work practice of motivational interviewing, which relies on empathy to promote empowerment and problem solving. Being a social worker myself, I could relate to this practice. Now, in both contexts of the study, the goal is to help parties reach a compromise that balances competing needs while remaining mindful of the other's interests. This concludes my presentation. God bless.